That going. Okay, cool. Yeah, so what we do is we have a Google Docs document that I've linked in the office hours channel, and we have the conversation in the tea time channel when it comes to just text chat about what we're going over. And generally it's going over some of the highlights that have happened over the past 2 weeks with the Dendron releases, and then going into a Q&A on just whatever people kind of are working on or thinking of and wanting to ask questions on.
Yep, that about sums it up. So something that we'll start. So what we'll start off with is we'll go over the highlights of the last 2 weeks. We'll demo some of the features, and then at the same time, if you look at the Office Hours channel, there's a Google Doc posted. It has notes of what we're talking about. John, who is also on this call, will be also taking notes as we're talking. But also at the very end, there's a Q&A. So if you were here for New User Tuesday yesterday, kind of the same deal. If you have any questions you would like us to answer or anything comes up while we're talking, feel free to put them at the end of the doc. And if you do, this is a very unstructured kind of format. If you do have stuff that you want to bring up, like while we're going over the highlights, and just feel free to unmute yourself and bring it up. Okay, with that, Derek, were you planning on screen sharing, or do you want me to?
I was planning on screen sharing.
All right, then I will turn it over to you then.
Sweet. You'll see in the Discord pop up that I have a screen sharing right now. There's a Google Doc, but I'm just really going to jump right into a VS Code window that I got in order to just show off some of the features around Wikilinks updates and enhancements. So just jump in here. So what I wanted to show first was that if you have Dendron inside of projects that have other files and docs, it's nice to be able to show to have wiki links to them and for them to be able to link back and forth. And this is a new feature that's been added. So in my case, I just have in a separate directory inside of my vault, I have a bash script. And so starting with this, usually these files you couldn't put wiki links within, and you couldn't use Wikilinks to direct to them to easily navigate back and forth. So I'm gonna, when I'm within my bash markdown file here, I can use a way to, let's copy note link. So what this does, when you use copy note link from that command palette, it links to the current file you're in. And since we can link back and forth now, I can put in the comments like, hey, to learn more, check out. And this, because this was added to the clipboard. And so in my case, now I could navigate. You can see that this gives me the little preview of that document. And it could be a document that is referencing what the script is used for. It could be whatever you want, depending on how your documentation is set up. And I could just use Control left click to jump right to it. That might be Command left click on Mac. I'm on Linux. And that's not all though, because I could also say, let's take a look at an example. And I could go back here and I could use copy note link just like I would in a regular document. You could see that I now have the script location that's been copied. And I could use Control Tab. Control Tab's a way to also hop back and forth between my notes. And copy paste, brought that in. And now you can't get the preview of files that aren't Dendron Notes at the moment. But now I can navigate between these, which is really cool. So that means if you have different files throughout that you want to be able to link to back and forth, you can make use of things like comments to link to your notes, and these will also work inside of Markdown code blocks. So if I was going to say, check out more info, go more example. I think this works this way too. Or maybe I was thinking it's code inside of the code files themselves. But yeah, that's kind of the updates that have happened to the Wikilinks at the moment. Is you can link back and forth between your notes and files as long as it's just plain text and it can be viewed in the VS Code editor. You should be able to navigate now between those. Let's see if I had any different examples I wanted to use with that. Not at the moment. Any extra comments on that, Kevin, or thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, so this is pretty versatile, and we've been using it a ton now in the Dendron code base. It gets to one of my biggest gripes with documentation nowadays is that it's the year 2021. We can reuse rockets, but we haven't figured out how to document code properly. Usually the two approaches are that you have your code in doc strings with the code, which is great because then it's local to your code base. You can update it when your code changes. But the problem is you're doing documentation in doc strings, which only get you so far. And then, you could use something else like ASCII Doctor or like a full-on documentation tool that requires it to be kept elsewhere, and then it drifts out of sync. The nice thing with now being able to link to regular files, especially like the linking to code in this case, is that you get the best of both worlds. You get to be able to keep your context with the code, but then also link out and get the full power of something like Dendron, where you can now additionally add diagrams, use node references and backlinks, and link, add all this rich contextual information that you wouldn't actually be able to do otherwise.
And something that I've noticed with different documentation tools, like I've worked on Python projects, and that makes use of Sphinx. And a lot of documentation tools, because they focus so much on the published result rather than the navigation and usage while you're within the code base, you're usually having to make sure in a separate window you have the docs, the published docs, open somewhere. You can maybe try to jump around within the directories yourself, but it's pretty difficult. And I really love that this is starting to make that approach. Like if I'm in the middle of working on this project, I would love to view the documentation while I'm in the project and to jump between linked files without constantly using a search bar in my web browser to try to figure it out. So I really like this. Okay, cool. All right. Another thing is that there's been a refresh to the Getting Started guide. So if you haven't looked just yet, we've updated a lot of the screenshots. We've added additional content, and thanks to a lot of the review feedback from Kevin as I was kind of going through and figuring out and what to improve and what to add in, we've gone through standardizing with the I wonder if these might be using a different theme, but for the most part, when we're looking at the themes being used, we're using Dark Plus in all of the screenshots. That's usually default for people installing VS Code or VS Codium. And so it should look similar to what you have when you first open it up. But yeah, we kind of have updated screenshots, updated definitions, and we've added some extra features around making sure refactoring's included, renaming's included, and at the very...
One thing to highlight as Derek is going through this is, if you notice, all the assets now are node references. And what this is really cool because it means that, Dendron, the UI changes fast, and instead of now having to update that image in all the places where it's used, we can just update that node reference. So now we have an asset hierarchy, and we can just update the image inside that asset node, and everywhere that node reference is embedded, it will automatically update, which is pretty wild for documentation. Like, this has been one of the biggest problems, is how do you keep your screenshots up to date?
Huge, huge, yes. Is that that means that the reusability piece is so big that, I mean, some of this is just here's basic lookup usage. Well, this can be used within the lookup documentation then, or in other places, and to just simply have a note ref so that I could go in to the file where all of my images are being referenced. If I update it in that one spot, it's going to then update the image across all my notes without me having to go, I better update, the URL that I'm referencing across them all, which is a pretty awesome deal, like what Kevin said. And oh yeah, so I wanted to also show that in the conclusion, there was some feedback that it would be cool to see something that's a bit of a more explanatory, choose your own adventure type of thing at the end, to kind of go, here's the type of things I maybe want to learn. But if we just put the term, like let's say I just were to list schema for new users, that may be difficult to even know what's that supposed to reference. So in the conclusion doc, there's now just a whole list of 3 different sections. Trail, forest, wilderness. Kevin had the idea of the terminology to be associated with Dendron. That's pretty cool. And but yeah, so now it's stated as learn how to find all the note references to a header, learn how to find all broken internal reference links, learn how to tag, to use tags, tag other users, etc. And so people can kind of go, this is what I've been wanting to learn next, or this seems useful to me, and can use it as a jumping off point.
Yeah, something else, just if you stay on this page, or actually, if you notice the way that this is organized, there's 2 levels. First, by difficulty. So trail is, like the most immediate things to take a look at, and then a forest and wilderness get progressively more like advanced. But then within each section, it is also organized by functional area. So something we're standardizing on is we're grouping features by how you would use them to manage knowledge. So we have like navigation, organizing, retrieval, editing. Actually, Derek, if you click on user guide, that would also be a good on the nav bar on the left. If you click on user guide, because then we'll see all the functional areas. The big part that a big piece of feedback we've been getting is that Dendron has so many features. I don't know where to start. And so from talking to users, like we ended up refining this to be grouping all our functionality into these 8 areas. So when you're working with knowledge, if features related to editing, features related to retrieving, which is finding notes, navigating notes, organizing notes, refactoring, sharing. Sharing is, for example, like publishing. Transferring is to get your notes into other systems, and then extending is, how do you add your custom plugins, custom logic into Dendron. This is, we actually did a bunch of internal discussions of how to best sort it, and I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. We're still working on moving all the either adding notes or moving notes from different places into these functional areas, which is why you see some links that still say like to do. It just means that those notes right now are somewhere else, and we need to refactor them to be under the user guide. But if nothing else, you should be able to like go to the user guide and then discover everything about Dendron by going through the different areas.
And I actually have a GitHub issue where I have set up for some follow-up to address some of these things too, since a lot of this is related to, like what Kevin was saying, some site reorg tasks that we had in order to want to make that navigation and user experience through the website easier and better for people. Yeah, so I think from demoing stuff and checking out the getting started, I don't know if we want to talk about the note trade system there, Kevin. But,
let's talk about the note trade system. I can share for that part.
Yeah.
Let me give my screen.
There we go.
All right. Node trades is something that we've added for the last release. So this is still considered experimental. So Dendron, we have the way that you can think of issues or maturity levels is we have these 4 stages.
Can you zoom in a little bit too there, Kevin?
Yes, let me zoom in. And node trades are something that is what we consider the germ stage, which means it's still subject to change at any point, and we're still working on the final interface. But that being said, they're here and you can try them out today. Right now, this is the same demo that I've used during the VS Code talk if you came in from that. And for node trades, what they let you do is they let you control how the hierarchy is generated and what the title is. So in Dendron, for example, we have custom notes like journal notes and scratch notes that come with their own hierarchy and own functionality, or like task notes. And so node trades are a way of adding custom behavior so you can make your own special notes. And I'll turn on screencast. And if anyone has questions, feel free to either interrupt or go into the Google Doc and write something. We'll follow that afterwards. The way you create something or you register a new node trade is Dendron register node trade. You can name, you give it a name. I'm just going to call it the demo. And then right now we expose 2 different functionalities for node trades. On will create, this changes. So when you do a lookup, for example, for let's see, when you do a lookup with a journal note, what it's going to do is it's going to automatically append the journal hierarchy. So this on will create set name modifier, this will modify what you see when you do a lookup with a note that has this trait, or when you're trying to create it. And then on create, you can set the title. So you can change the title of what that trait will be. And this gives you an ability to customize the hierarchy to something much more fine-tuned than right now, which you could maybe set in a Dendron.yaml. So if you wanted to create a journal node, for example, that and these are special so you also have access to whatever the user has selected and whatever is on the board. We're going to get rid of those, and we're just going to say, if I wanted to create a note, for example, that always had .demo as like the second part, then I will set this name modifier here. And then for the title, maybe I always want the title. Well, let's just say that I'm just going to, regardless of what the name of the note is, the title should be demo. Then what I can do now is I can, now that I've registered the note trait, I can create a note with this trait. In this case, it'll be demo. Now there's a chance I need to reload my window. I do need to reload. It does not take into effect until you reload, because this is still a germ feature that's coming in the next version. And now that I've reloaded, I can create a note with this trait. I'll do demo, and notice like it appended demo to whatever the current note is. So for example, if I were in foo and I were to try to create a note with the demo trait, it would do foo.demo. And after I create it, it'll set the title to demo. The way that Dendron knows that this is note with the demo trait is it appends a trait ID to it. Something cool is that a note can have multiple traits. So you can actually chain these together. You can think of traits, if you use Rust, they're like, we got inspired by Rust traits, which allow you to share behavior by using traits. You can think of Dendron traits like that. You can share behavior to different nodes. And right now it's kind of limited. You can, change the hierarchy and you can change the title. But we're also going to add support for being able to set the body. So, if you want to create a sprint trait, and every time you create the sprint trait, you want to pull in data or like set it to something very specific, you can do that. We're adding the ability to validate the front matter from a trait. We'll also change how your note is rendered. So, example of that is today we create a task note. And you set yourself as the owner, and I copy this task node, then Dendron will do some decorations. This is also something you'll be able to control with node trait. So node traits really will be opening up the possibility for you to define your own types of nodes that you can use and share in your knowledge base. And today, the primary use case for right now, the on will create and on create, is journal notes. For example, if you wanted to create your own journal notes where the title isn't just the last component, you can do so with your custom journal trait. And then if you have a specific hierarchy that you want your journals to be in, then now that's something that you can customize with this. So node traits, we're very excited about it. There's a lot of avenues it opens. It is still highly experimental, so give it a shot, and would love to hear any feedback in the feedback channel. All right.
I was actually going to see that one of the people who's in the channel right now has asked in tea time, hey, what was it about that asset screenshot updates where you're able to update it everywhere? And I was thinking I could just bring up Dendron site and VS Codium to kind of show what we meant.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Oh, do I still have mine on? Let me stop streaming mine.
Yeah, let me also move around my stuff since I'm recording. Share my screen here. Okay. Cool. So here I am inside of our Dendron site repo, which is what publishes to wiki.dendron.so. And you can actually see this repository. It's open source, and so it's sitting inside of our GitHub organization as Dendron site. So if you'd like to see, wait, how did he do what he's doing? You'd be able to see in there. So in my case, we thought, let's put the images inside of the asset portion of the hierarchy. And let me open the preview too on the side. So then what we have here is all of our images. We're pretty much thinking of using the asset dot whatever portion of the hierarchy to be different ways of storing all the screenshots, GIFs, and the like as pretty much as the source of truth single retrieval area. And so what this means is that since they're all going to be here, usually the problem would be if you have your image stored in a certain place, you're now going to have to copy paste that path all the time. And if you ever update that screenshot, you then have to go, where throughout all my docs did I do that reference? And because now I got to go update all of them. But because Dendron has built-in capabilities to use note references to embed a section beneath a header somewhere else, and because of the refactoring powers that Dendron has, where if you want to update the name of this header, you could do something like rename header. And what that will do for you is it will update everywhere across your docs. Wherever you've mentioned the old header name, it'll update them all to whatever the new one is, which is pretty awesome and pretty powerful. And so then what a note ref ends up looking like is, we go to, see this says tutorial welcome screen. If I go to the tutorial user interface, where I see this tutorial, let's see, yeah, like right here, I'm doing a layout. I'm actually referring to the asset preview doc and then the tutorial Dendron layout header. And so if I want to navigate there, this is the section I pretty much was embedding. And so that's the current strategy we're using to just ensure that we can share the docs and have a lot less work to do whenever we update, since we would just need to update that header.
All right, we're about 2 minutes from the end of office hours, and at this point, any questions? Oop.
So I did have a small question about the node traits, and yeah, very exciting stuff. I was wondering how it relates to the existing functionality for hooks. Is there an overlap there? Does it replace it, or?
Yeah, so the way that to think about that is like hooks is like go-to, like it's an escape valve for like if all else fails, you should be able to do it in hooks. Node traits provide a much more guided approach of we give you like certain entry points to manipulating a note. You can set the title and you can set the hierarchy, and then you'll be able to set some other stuff. And if you put your notes into, if you put your logic into traits, then you can also like combine that with other traits. So moving forward, the guidance will be that if you want to add custom logic to your notes, you should try to do it in a node trait. I mean, like it's gradual, right? Like first, like if you can do it with a schema and a template and that's all you need, that's great. If you need more logic, put it in a custom node trait. And then if even that isn't enough, then that's where hooks come in. Because hooks is actually just like use arbitrary JavaScript when you create your node, and anything that we haven't covered that isn't possible in node traits, then that's where hooks will come in.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that answer.
Mm-hmm.
I am new to Dendron. I got into it yesterday, and I'm inside the student org at my college where we're using Notion right now. How do you convince them to use Dendron instead of Notion?
I mean, in terms of like influencing your friends and colleagues, there's a book about that, I think, how to influence friends. But in terms of, it depends on how receptive, I guess, like your peers are to using like text-based tools and that are based in Git. I would say like if they are receptive to that, you can show them 2 links that are useful. One is the YouTube stream for VS Code presentation, because that goes through like a demo of some compelling features. And then another one is interview did with Nest Labs, which is another popular PKM community where we go into like the benefits. Jonathan will add those links to the Google Doc. But the other thing that is cool is like with Dendron, like what we want to support is the ability for you to use Dendron even if your school or your team isn't using it. We have a functionality called pods, which lets you import and export data from Dendron to other places and vice versa. So what that means is, for example, like your classmates could be using Notion, you could use Dendron, you can use Dendron to publish to Notion so that, to them, like nothing changes. Right now, we have an experimental Notion pod. I believe that it supports export, but not import. or vice versa. Like one of those halves is missing. But to sum it up, like two things. Like if you think they can be convinced, those resources I've mentioned are probably the best place to start. If otherwise, they are more, if they're using Notion, it might be just like they're more comfortable using a graphical interface. Then you can also embed, that doesn't prevent you from using Dendron, and also sharing your data inside of Notion.
Got it. Right now, we're currently using one Notion account to store all our stuff. So, I mean, it's a CS-based club, so I think they'd be interested in it. One other question: how does the privacy, like the access management stuff, work right now? Like, 'cause this is for internal stuff. So, how do you make sure that only we can access it, as opposed to like everyone seeing it?
Yeah. So access control right now, like the way we manage it, we use Git for that. So in our team workspace, we use a private Git repo, and Git. So depending on what you use to host your Git repo, we use GitHub. You can have a private repository, and you can only allow certain individuals to use that. What's cool is we mix our private stuff and public stuff. So like in our workspace, we have the private team, like tasks and whatnot, but we also like have the public user guide and developer docs. And so for access control, we use the access control from GitHub or GitLab or whatever remote provider you currently use.
I meant more along the ways of like viewing the website privately, like a login or a auth.
Yeah, so for the website right now, you can publish. The website is just a static HTML page. So if you publish using, for example, GitHub, then it's going to be public. I believe, if you pay for like the GitHub private plan, like they have like password control. I think same with Netlify. You can always just put it behind a firewall. If you, depending on how much control or willingness to customize your server setup is. We don't have any built-in like private publishing yet. We're planning on adding that next year. But the way that people do it today is they will publish Dendron either using like GitHub, Netlify. Most hosting providers support password protected or private pages. So using the authorization mechanism there. And yeah, so that's how people do it today.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I can add just one more thing, Notion is able to export Markdown. So the last time I had to do a big import from Notion, from a Notion workspace, I used Dendron's Markdown pod, and some strange things happened to some of the assets, but especially for text data, it can work fine.
Got it. But yeah, great point. Notion does export Markdown, so it should work for. Besides for some edge cases, you should get a rough draft of what is in there. All right. Any last questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming to office hours. It's great to see both old faces and new faces, or hear old and new voices in this case.
Yeah, or avatars or whatnot.
Exactly. All right, we'll have the Google Doc as well as the recording up by next week at the latest, probably later today. In the meanwhile, everybody have some good holiday time, and that's all I have.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending and for all the questions, and I'll also be answering. I noticed that my stream might have cut out, my screen sharing might have cut out a little bit when I demoed the asset embedding thing. So in the Tea Time channel, I'll include like little links to where it's example used, and also make sure it's in the office hours too.
All right.
Awesome. Well, everyone have happy holidays, and if you're celebrating, and see you next. I guess this is the last office hours of the year, huh? So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one.
Till next year.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.